The term tzniut, Ashkenazi pronunciation, tzniut, modesty, or privacy, is used within Judaism and has its greatest influence as a concept within Orthodox Judaism and sometimes within conservative Judaism. It is used to describe both the character trait of modesty and humility, as well as a group of Jewish laws pertaining to conduct in general and especially between the sexes. The term is frequently used with regard to the rules of dress for women. Hebrew Bible and Talmud. Humility is a paramount ideal within Judaism. Moses is referred to as exceedingly humble, more than any man in the world, though the adjective used of Moses is anav, and not zana. The cognate of the noun tzniut, the verb zana, to be humble, occurs in Proverbs chapter 11 verse 2 and walk humbly, in Micah chapter 6 verse 8. The Talmud states that humility is one of the characteristic traits of the Jewish people. Description: Tzniut includes a group of laws concerned with modesty, in both dress and behavior. In the Babylonian Talmud, Rabbi Elazar bar Zado connected the injunction at Micah chapter 6 verse 8 to walk humbly with your God as referring to modesty and discretion in dress and in behavior. In the legal dimension of Orthodox rabbinic literature, the issue of tzniut is discussed in more technical terms. How much skin may a person expose, and so on. Notwithstanding these details, the concept of humility and modesty as a positive character trait, a practice, and a way of life, a way of walking, is also taught to be important in rabbinic literature. This awareness informs the concept and the practice of tzniut in its rules and details. Practical applications. Dress. The principal guiding point of tzniut in regard to dress is that a Jew should not dress in a way that attracts attention. This does not mean dressing poorly, but that neither men nor women should dress in a way that overly emphasizes their physical appearance or attracts undue attention. There are many different interpretations of what tzniut means, so people from different communities will often dress differently. Orthodox Judaism requires both men and women to substantially cover their bodies. According to many opinions, this involves covering the elbows and knees. In Haredi communities, men wear long trousers and usually long-sleeved shirts. Many will not wear short sleeves at all. Haredi Ashkenazi practice discourages sandals without socks both in and out of the synagogue, whereas Haredi Sephardi communities tend to accept sandals at least outside of synagogue. Dress in a synagogue and, according to many, in public should be comparable to that worn by the community when meeting royalty or government. Haredi women wear blouses covering the elbow and collarbone, and skirts that cover the knees while standing and sitting. The ideal sleeve and skirt length varies by community. Some women try not to follow fashion, while others wear fashionable but modest clothing. Haredi women avoid skirts with slits, preferring instead kick pleats. They also avoid overly eye-catching colors, especially bright red, as well as clothing that is tight. Many will only wear closed-toe shoes and always wear stockings, the thickness of which varies by community. Modern Orthodox women also usually adhere to tzniut and dress in a modest fashion as compared to the general society's ways, but their communal definition does not necessarily include covering their elbows, collarbones, or knees, and may allow for wearing pants. Modern Orthodox men's dress is usually indistinguishable from their non-Orthodox peers. They will wear shorts and short-sleeved shirts. Sandals without socks, while generally not worn in a synagogue, are usually accepted in modern Orthodox and religious Zionist communities in Israel for daily dress. Conservative Judaism formally requires modest dress, although this requirement is often not observed on a day-to-day basis, but is somewhat more observed when attending synagogue, while day-to-day dress often simply reflects the general society. Many conservative synagogues expect somewhat more modest dress for synagogue attendance, and may have specific dress requirements to receive synagogue honors. Reform Judaism has no religious dress requirements. Style of dress involves cultural considerations distinct from religious requirements. Members of conservative and reform synagogues may abide by dress codes generally ranging from business casual to informal. There are many Orthodox synagogues where dress, while meeting religious modesty requirements, is quite casual. Many Haredi and Hasidic communities have special customs and styles of dress which serve to identify members of their communities, but regard these special dress features as customs of their communities rather than as general religious requirements expected of all observant Jews. Hair covering. Jewish law requires married women to cover their hair. According to the Talmud, this is a biblical requirement, which in this context is called Dat Moshe. The most common hair coverings in the Haredi community are the sheitel, the Tzniut, and the mitpacket or tichel, as well as hats and berets. The practice of covering hair with wigs is debated among halakhic authorities. Many authorities, including Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, permitted it, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe actively encouraged it, while some authorities, especially Sephardi rabbis, forbid it. Modern Orthodox women often cover their hair partially, using hats, berets, baseball caps, bandanas, and/or scarves to accomplish the goal, depending on how casually they are dressed. Those who cover their hair entirely usually opt for wigs or hats. A style of half-wig known as a fall has become increasingly common in some segments of modern and Haredi Orthodox communities. It is usually worn with either a hat or a headband, or mixed with the natural hair. In Yemen, unmarried girls covered their heads also, like the Muslims there. However, upon their emigration to Israel and other places, this custom has been abandoned. While Rebbe Aharon Roth, founder of Shomer Emunim, praised this custom, no Ashkenazi community, including the most strict Haredi circles, have ever practiced such a custom. According to tradition, Jewish men, married or not, must cover their heads. The most common head covering is the kippah, known as yarmulke in Yiddish. Orthodox men wear something on their heads at almost all times, while non-Orthodox men may cover their heads only when performing some religious act, or when eating. Few cover the entire head. Almost all will bathe with the head uncovered, but sleeping varies by community or family practice. The exact nature of this practice, and how binding it is a matter of dispute among halakhic authorities. Wearing a hat is not required by Jewish law, and those who wear a hat generally wear a kippah underneath. However, there are some rabbis, especially in Hasidic Judaism, who require a double head covering, of kippah and hat or talis, during prayer. Conservative and Reform Judaism do not generally require women to wear head coverings. Some more traditional conservative synagogues ask that married women cover their heads during services. However, some more liberal conservative synagogues suggest that women, married or not, wear head coverings similar to those worn by men, and some require it, not for modesty, but as a feminist gesture of egalitarianism. Almost all conservative synagogues require men to wear a head covering, but in Reform synagogues there is often no requirement. However, kippot may be provided to anybody who wishes to wear them. Female singing voice. Orthodox Judaism. In Orthodox Judaism, men are generally not allowed to hear women sing, a prohibition called kol isha. The Talmud classifies this as erva. The majority view of halakhic authorities is that this prohibition applies at all times, and forbids a man to pray or study Torah in the presence of a woman who is singing, similar to other prohibitions classified as erva. A minority view holds that the prohibition of praying or studying in the presence of kol isha applies only while reciting the Shema Yisrael prayer. There is debate between poskim whether the prohibition applies to a recorded voice, where the singer cannot be seen, where the woman is not known to the man who is listening, and where he has never seen her or a picture of her. There are also opinions, following Samson Raphael Hirsch and Azriel Hildesheimer, that exclude singing in mixed groups from this prohibition, such as synagogue prayer or dinner table zemirot. based on the idea that the female voice is not distinctly heard as separate from the group in these cases. Other denominations. Conservative Judaism interprets the relevant passage of the Talmud as expressing a rabbi's opinion rather than imposing a requirement. Reform Judaism fundamentally rethought the status of women within Judaism in a series of synods from 1837 onward in both Europe and the United States. It no longer regards this traditional law as applicable to modern times. Touch in Orthodox Judaism, men and women who are not married and are not closely related are generally not allowed to touch each other. Many Orthodox married couples will also not touch one another in public. A person who refrains from touching the opposite sex is said to be shomer negaya. Shmirat negaya applies to touching which is b'derech chiba. According to some authorities, mainly of modern Orthodox background, a quick handshake, particularly in the context of earning a living in a business setting, does not fall under this category. However, people who are stringently shomer negaya will avoid shaking hands with a member of the opposite sex, even in a business context. This is almost universally observed within the Haredi community and somewhat observed within the modern Orthodox community where the term originated. In recent decades, Conservative and Reform Judaism do not follow these laws. Examples of relatives that one may touch include parents, children, grandparents, grandchildren, and a husband and wife, if the woman is not nida. This prohibition is colloquially called shmirat negaya or shomer negaya. Whether or not children adopted at a young age are included in this prohibition is a matter of dispute and case-by-case decision. Yichud in Orthodox Judaism, men and women who are not married to each other and are not immediate blood relatives are not allowed to enter into a secluded situation in a room, or in an area that is private. This measure is taken to prevent the possibility of sexual relations which is prohibited outside of marriage. According to some authorities, this applies even between adoptive parents and adoptive children over the age of maturity, while others are more lenient with children adopted from a young age. Simply being in a room together alone does not necessarily constitute seclusion. The situation must be private, where no one else is expected to enter. Originally, this prohibition applied only to married women secluded with men other than their husbands, but it was extended to include single women. According to the Talmud, this extension occurred in the time of King David, when his son Amnon raped Absalom's sister, Tamar. On the issue of elevators, opinions vary. Some allow yichud in an elevator for a time of no more than 30 seconds, while others forbid it under all circumstances, partly due to the possibility of an elevator getting stuck. Conservative and Reform Judaism do not regard these rules as applicable. Synagogue services in Orthodox Judaism, men and women are not allowed to mingle during prayer services, and Orthodox synagogues generally include a divider, called a mechitza, creating separate men's and women's sections. This idea comes from the old Jewish practice during the times of the Temple in Jerusalem when there was a women's balcony in the Ezrat Nashim to separate the male and female spectators at the special Sukkot celebrations. There is also a prophecy in Zechariah which talks about men and women mourning separately. The Talmud took this account and inferred that if men and women should be separate in times of mourning, then they certainly should be separate in times of happiness. Mechitzot are usually seen in Orthodox synagogues to separate the men and women. In Reform synagogues, they are never seen. The original German Reform synagogues had balconies, although in modified form. Although in the past many conservative synagogues had women's balconies or separate seating, most conservative synagogues moved to family seating in the 1960s. Today, the conservative movement puts a strong emphasis on egalitarianism, so that men and women have equal roles in the prayer service. However, non-egalitarian services, separate seating, and the use of a mechitza are still considered valid options for conservative congregations. Observances. There are several levels to the observance of physical and personal modesty according to Orthodox Judaism, as derived from various sources in Halakha. Observance of these rules varies from aspirational to mandatory to routine across the spectrum of Orthodox stricture and observance. Not dwelling on lascivious or immoral thoughts. Avoiding staring at members of the opposite sex, particularly at any part of the opposite sex's private anatomy. Keeping the majority of one's body clothed in respectable clothing at all times. Avoiding the company of uncouth individuals or situations where an atmosphere of levity and depravity prevails. Avoiding looking at pictures or scenes that will be sexually arousing. Refraining from touching a person of the opposite sex, especially in a lingering, arousing manner. See Negaya. Not looking at animals or birds copulating. Not hugging or kissing one's spouse in public. Among Haredim, no physical contact is permissible. Although early Talmudic and rabbinic sources did not restrict the sexual act, many later authorities have expressed opposition to most forms of sex, with the exception of vaginal penile intercourse.